I am grateful this morning for amplification. One of the things Ken left me as he took off for his 9-day retreat is a little bit of a cold. It's made it through Joshua and Roma and Tobias, and Saturday it became my turn. So, but I am also delighted to be able to be here to share this morning and talk about happiness as a choice. I love the daily word that you read so beautifully, Dave. But I love what it says. To experience joy's gifts, I have to be willing to choose joy and to welcome it. And even in this reading, joy and happiness were synonymous. And I believe very strongly that happiness is a choice that we make by daily saying yes to life. But just saying yes isn't enough. We must then nurture and sustain it. And for me, what Ken asked me to share with all of you is some of the daily actions or objects or sources of inspiration that I use that helps me cultivate that happiness on a daily basis. And as I go through this, I invite you to think what works for you, what aligns, what resonates, and what doesn't. It's like a buffet. Take what you want, take what looks good to you, and leave the rest up there. Brussels sprouts never make it off the buffet when I'm going through the line. Pudding pretty much always does. So figure out for you what is your joy in terms of what works for you. And in preparing this, I actually became even more present to stuff that brings me joy that I hadn't even realized that this was a part of it until I came up with that framework of actions, objects, and inspiration. And then probably the biggest gift for me to be able to use in preparing today's remarks is that this week I spoke at a conference in Salt Lake City, and on the same stage and on the same schedule, Barack Obama spoke on Wednesday morning, I spoke on Wednesday afternoon, and Oprah spoke on Thursday morning. Now,
that's some tall cotton, as they say that.
way tall cotton bin. And the chance to be in the audience and to hear what those two luminaries had to share, regardless of where you stand politically, the opportunity to hear inspiration. And part of Oprah's talk, I think I could use a glass of water. We can even just reuse my cup, but something to drink, yeah. She reminded me of, in her talk, she reminded me of the work that Gary Zukov has done. I think many of us have read his books, The Adaptation of the Law of Physics, that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. But before there is an action, there has to be an intention. Before there is an action, there has to be an intention. And that intention determines the way things turn out the way they do. I teach continually, almost every time I get in front of a group of MBA students or executives or undergrads. I talk about, to be effective in our communication, we have to know what is our audience, what is our intent, and what then is our message. And so to have Oprah talk about intention just like brought it all together for me. So my intention in the next 20 minutes or so is to share tools that help me grab happiness in hopes that you will either use some of these or create some of your own. So let's start with some action. First action I try to do every morning, as long as Ken's not still in bed when I leave the house, is make the bed. Now, this sounds ridiculous that this makes me happy, but it does. There's something about, like, I don't do the military corners and all of that, but there's something about leaving one room in the house that looks put together. And for me, there's also something about crawling into a bed that has been made that night. If Kid is not a bed maker. Honey, I don't know if you're watching the live stream or if you're gonna be watching this after you get back from your retreat, but you asked me to speak, so I get to say what I want. If I left early and the bed is unmade, when I get home, before I crawl in at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, I will make the bed just so I can crawl into a made bed. New action that I've taken on in terms of trying to cultivate an attitude of gratitude. The first email I write every day, and I write a lot of emails every day, the first email is an appreciation. It's almost my admission ticket to get to answer any other emails. I have to first think of who was somebody yesterday that I need to acknowledge and thank. And I've started doing that. I always start the subject line the same way, with great appreciation for, and then I'll acknowledge what it is. And maybe it's a sentence, maybe it's a paragraph or two. But it's so easy to get into our work lives and have everything be reactive rather than proactive. Now, I've become a real fan of the work of Gretchen Rubin. And anybody familiar with Gretchen Rubin and her work, The Happiness Project? Really some wonderful, wonderful stuff. I listen to her podcast every week, and she encouraged people to make a list of 19 for 19. 19 things that will make you happy if you do them in 2019. And this isn't like a to-do list. Some of these things I can cross off. Some of them may not get done by the end of the year. But it allows me to keep my focus on, am I doing stuff on a regular basis that brings me happiness? And if not, I need to insert some more of them in there. Some of the fun ones get always, let's see, where are we at? Vacation somewhere that we've never been before. Create monthly adventures with each child. Now, when I wrote that, I was only thinking of Joshua and Roma. Some of the best adventures have been what Tobias, our 20-year-old, and I have taken on. And he's to the point that he'll say, okay, what are we doing for March? And so I like that. Getting a mani-pedi or a barbershop shave once a month. Just some stuff like that that brings me happiness. And then at the end of the day, before I crawl into bed, I have a partner, and I try every night to send a gratitude list, just a text, 5 things for which I'm grateful for. I don't beat myself up if I miss it, but it lets me begin the day by making the bed, end the day by doing a gratitude list. And then, now here comes the first prop out of the magic box. Several years ago, I had a student, Leah Pukwese, who gave me, in one of the talks that she did, a happiness journal. And it's just a 1-sentence capture of the day. And so I write in it almost every day in terms of, what went on. So somebody give me a date. Marty, when's your birthday? October 13th. Okay, so I can go to October 13th. That's September. Let's go to October 13th. In 2016, I wrote that I was feeling solid about the quality of my grading and the work that I was doing. 2017, returning to Boston and to a conference with greater strength. 2018, seeing Addison again and finally meeting Katie Ornstein, who founded the Op-Ed Project. So those are 3 years back, what happened on October 13th. And so I love having this. I did not know when this was given to me who Gretchen Rubin was, and I started listening to her podcast, and every night I was writing in this journal, not realizing she was already in my life. And I was very excited by that, and I'll tell you a little bit about one of her other books in a moment. So those are actions that I can take. Secondly, I look at objects that I will keep in my life that bring me happiness. There's the the woman, I'm struggling for her name. Gwen, you can help me out. What? Marie Kondo. And her theory of clutter, decluttering your life, that the only things that you should have in your closet, in your home, in your world, are things that bring you joy. And if it does not bring you joy, find something else that brings you joy. So I've got a couple of things with me that bring me joy. This is a jewelry box that sat on my mother's dresser when I was a child. And it had, at that point, had earrings in it. And I asked her at one point, I said, what's the story of the jewelry box? She said, well, when she was in college, she had a professor who had asked her to make a dress for, now, my mother didn't use the word boyfriend, and I don't think she used partner, for her professor's special friend whose niece was coming to visit, and they wanted to have a little outfit for her. So this gay couple in Oklahoma in the 1940s asked my mom to make a dress for their niece, because gay uncles, we have to show up pretty fabulous. And she did such an awesome job on that little outfit that the professor's special friend made her this jewelry box. So I love having this on my dresser. I don't have a lot of stuff on my dresser. I'm not a pure minimalist, but every time I reach in it or Roma reaches in it and pulls stuff out, it connects me to my mom and to that legacy. The other one, and Francine, thank you for commenting on my shirt this morning. She leaned forward and she goes, it's a really nice shirt, really pretty shirt, I think is what you said. Gorgeous, thank you. And Alan, I have to acknowledge, I am more casual than I usually am when I do public speaking. I'm used to having a jacket. I don't go as far as the tie. I'm used to having a jacket. But this shirt brings me joy. The first TED Talk that I ever did, this is the shirt that I wore. And so when I see photos of me in this shirt, I think of how much joy that has brought me. And then I'm trying a new thing, to always be reading a book of fiction. And so I have in the box the book of fiction that I'm reading, Inheritance by Danny Shapiro. Actually, I thought it was fiction. It's a memoir, but it's not a business book. So that's the one that I'm reading this year. And so I invite you to look at the objects that you have around you. Are they bringing you joy? Is there a special story you can attach to something? Or is there some clutter that is actually getting in the way of you having happiness? I love, again, going back to the daily word for today, I consider how I might make room in my life for more gladness and aliveness. Perhaps it's time to finally release. And you decide what goes in there. It might be a resentment. It might be a fight that you're having. It might be clothes that don't fit you anymore. It might be items in your house that no longer serve you. So look at the objects that you have around you and what is it that can bring you joy. Now, the one object, and I chose not to do slides, not only to make it easier on the tech team back there. I didn't know what to get you. This is my gift. But if I had done slides, I would have a photo of, I have one shelf in the house that is empty. There is one shelf that is right outside our bedroom and our bathroom and what used to be our nursery that we have agreed not to put anything on. Or if we put something there, it's for a very short period of time. Like it's on its way upstairs or it's a bill that has to get paid right away. It doesn't become cluttered. The rest of my house is not as clean and clutter-free, but when I see that shelf, it brings me joy that there's a part of my life that is clutter-free. And then the final piece is inspiration. Who can you read? Who can you listen to? Who can you have coffee with that is going to inspire you, that is going to bring a smile and bring joy to your face? I mentioned earlier, I've become a big fan of podcasting. And so I listen to about 6 consistently, and I also spend a lot of time commuting. And so, but I'll listen to them either on BART, going to my office at Columbia, or in the car going down the peninsula to my office at Stanford. Happier with Gretchen Rubin is a great one, and I'm glad to give this as a list to anybody who wants it. She and her sister do this podcast every week about how you can bring more happiness into your life. But the thing I really like about it is on Sunday night she does A Little Happier, and it's a 3 or 4 minute podcast. And those are some of my favorites of hers. I'm also a huge West Wing fan. There's a podcast called West Wing Weekly that every week they go through one more episode of the show. We're up to season 6. I don't know what I'm going to do when we get season 7. The show's over. The show's been off the air for 17 years. And yet still there are enough fans to sustain a podcast about it. I love young adults literature. Lois Lowry is one of my favorite children's authors. And I love reading her books. I can't wait till Roma is old enough to read them. S.E. Hinton was an author when I was a teenager that her work was really inspiring to me. And going back to read things that are written at a 12, 13, 14-year-old's point of view is a useful thing for me, and it also makes it accessible. I can rewatch It's a Wonderful Life or Roman Holiday or any number of films that will bring joy to my life. And I also have on my iPhone a playlist of music that brings me joy. Has a lot of Hamilton in it, has a lot of Moana in it, and stuff from little-known musicals like Last 5 Years and other shows that I just really like. And so I find that having actions that I take, objects that I keep around me, and sources of inspiration allow me to keep that choice of happiness alive, to keep saying yes to life. But to be sure, saying yes to life also means saying no to some other things. And we don't talk as much about the power of saying no. But as a busy person with essentially 2 full-time jobs and 3 children with different sorts of needs, 2 of them under the age of 3, when I say yes to something, I have to say no to something else. I spent this week, as I said, at this conference in Salt Lake City, and there was no speaker fee. My travel was covered. I ended up delivering a couple of workshops, one that had 2,500 people in it, which is larger than I have addressed in a long time. But saying yes to speaking at Qualtrics's annual user group meant saying no to putting Joshua and Roma to bed 2 nights in a row. And because Ken is on his retreat right now, it meant that I had to rely on neighbors and friends to take care of our children for 2 days. And that's not a choice I want to make very often. It was worth it in this moment, and there are other times, but there are also other times where I'll be able to say no. That's time for me and my kids. I'm further behind in my email. I'm further behind in my grading. And I know that will all get caught up because I said yes to something. I have to say no or not right now to some other things. And so as you think about what you want to do in your life to cultivate happiness, to say yes to life, I also invite you to think through what will bring you happiness, but also require you to necessarily say no. And that boundary setting, that clarity of what works and what doesn't, what we know to be true and what we know we have to let go, comes together in a way that I think can be profound for us. And so before we go into meditation, I just want to restate one final time. Happiness is a choice we make daily by saying yes to life. But we must nurture and sustain that choice with actions, with objects, and with inspiration for it to truly bear fruit in our lives. I invite you to take that into our time of meditation.